And earlier today, Special Counsel Robert Mueller introduced new charges against Paul Manafort and Rick Gates. The new charges include tax and bank fraud and are the latest action in Mueller's year-long investigation. Last Friday, 13 Russian nationals and 3 Russian companies were indicted by Mueller as well. The special counsel has accused them of conspiring and using false instruments and computer hacking to interfere with the 2016 presidential election.
Employees of the Internet Research Agency, a so-called Russian troll farm, allegedly used fake bank accounts, websites, and names, organized U.S. rallies, and released humiliating information about Hillary Clinton. The New York Times released a report stating that their Russian sources have revealed that more than 1,000 people in Russia were involved in this project over 3 years. President Trump has publicly stated that there was no collusion on his part as this anti-U.S. campaign began in 2014. Although this was a Russian operation, there is no official evidence that the Russian government was responsible for this project.
And here to break down what the most recent guilty plea and last week's indictments mean for the investigation moving forward are Talking Points analysts Dan Prager and Jack Watson. Guys, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Now, Alex van der Zwaan, the lawyer, has pleaded guilty. Jack, what does this mean for the Mueller investigation going forward?
Well, Mike, we're beginning to see a little bit of a pattern here with these guilty pleas. Every single one of the guilty pleas so far in the recent days, van der Zwaan, including van der Zwaan and Michael Flynn, have been lying to the FBI. They have admitted to basically perjuring themselves when giving details about their involvement in the 2016 campaign and with Bob Mueller's investigation.
Yeah, that's the big thing, is that they're catching more and more people in lies. And it's not just that these people, because for the most part they're minor players. Van der Zwaan is a very minor player in this. It's more that they're catching more people in lies and they're saying, looking back and saying, hey, who else is lying?
If we're looking at pattern recognition in that regard, who can we expect the probe to target next?
Carter Page, I think, is the big name that they're going to go after next. Page is the guy that was named in the Nunes memo recently, but more importantly, he's had a lot of ties to the Russian government, trying to set up meetings between Trump and Russia. It is important to remember that the Russian government and Page have had ties before, and actually, surprisingly enough, the Russian government interviewed him to be an agent a couple years back. They rejected him, calling him too much of an idiot, and those are their words, not mine, to be part of this. So that is a little bit of an interesting fact there.
Page is the logical pick here, but it's also important to remember that Rick Gates, who was a campaign aide in Trump's campaign, in 2016 campaign, he's expected, according to multiple sources, to plead guilty here. It'll be interesting to see what, after a plea deal, after what he gives Mueller about, in my opinion, what would be probably the biggest fish so far, Paul Manafort, who has already been indicted, however, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
And speaking of those indictments, Dan, what has been the response from President Trump and the White House as a whole?
Of course, it's the no collusion that he shouts out on Twitter all the time. But it is important to remember that this Russia investigation is not all about Trump. It's just about looking into Russia's actions in the events of the election. Paul Manafort and Rick Gates, a lot of what they're doing has very little to do with their time as in the Trump campaign. It happened long before. So when you're looking at van der Zwaan, his lying to the FBI, it probably hurts Manafort and Gates' case more than it hurts Trump. So that can be separate. They can be guilty without Trump being, but it is a bad sign that Trump saw these things and still invited them into their campaign.
Let's talk about those 13 indictments for a second of those Russians that are accused of meddling. Do we expect more indictments to come of it?
I certainly would, because it's an important thing to remember that the main thing that Mueller is after here, he's not after Donald Trump, he's not after any specific person, he is assigned to look into Russian meddling, and that's specifically what he's charging these 13 people with. So it's going to be interesting to see if we see many more of these similarly.
Exactly. Mueller works slow, he's very meticulous. This is just the first round. You're going to see more.
Well, obviously, it's just beginning. There's still a lot more to go. We'll always be watching it here on Talking Points. Dan and Jack, thanks so much for joining us.